This is like the 5th time I've tried to record this, and I have a bird, my wife's bird. He's very loud, so if he interrupts, so be it. I have 5 blankets over his cage right now to quiet him down. So, what do I want to talk about? I wanted to talk about fish food and what I use. There aren't really any recommendations here. It's what works for me. Most fish food that I've used has been successful. I try to stay away from the really cheap stuff. I found a few good bargain foods that I use. So basically, what I feed my big tank upstairs, my 120, is a combination of Dainichi. This is the Ultima Krill. I feed the baby size, which is the 1 millimeter roughly. I also feed the Color Supreme, which is small, which would be 3 millimeter, and the Color FX, in basically a 3 millimeter small. So I combine 2 or 3 of the Dainichis, and then I also put in this 1.5 millimeter Your Fish Stuff Cichlid Supreme. Now, if you've never used this food, I was surprised to look at the ingredients list and see what's in there. And I bought a small bag. I'm through the first one now. But it's 41% protein, 8% fat, 3% fiber, and 12% moisture. The first ingredient's herring meal, which is decent. And then green pea protein. So that's kind of like their flour, or like a just another filler, kind of. Then there is wheat, which is a binder. Shrimp meal, kelp meal, squid meal, soy protein, fish oil, krill meal, spirulina, chlorella algae, dried yeast, lecithin, garlic, paprika, marigold, astaxanthin, beta-carotene, and so on, vitamins and minerals. This stuff's really decent. I was surprised. I feed it to my big tank. I mix it in with the Dainichi as kind of a filler in there and something else for them to eat, a little bit different flavor. And it's about half the price of the Dainichi. It's probably even less than half, because Dainichi's fairly expensive. It's a female hummingbird looking at me right now. So the Dainichis, the best one, I guess, is the Color FX. If you want something that's not like a veggie based, out of the Dainichis. This has, of course, the white fish meal, wheat flour, Antarctic krill meal, wheat germs, spirulina algae, 45% crude protein, 5% crude fat, 4% crude fiber, 9% moisture, 9% ash, 2% calcium. I try not to get hung up on the ingredients list too much, because it just causes so many arguments in social media. And I have used Northfin. I liked it. My biggest problem with Northfin was 2 things. Well, 3. One was the price. Dainichi's expensive, a little cheaper than the Northfin. The second thing, I didn't like the way that it sank in the tank compared to the Dainichi. And third thing that bugged me, which is just a personal thing with me, was a lot of the infighting on the internet, which isn't fair to the food because it's a good food, but every time somebody would suggest, what should I feed my fish? What should I feed my fish? And somebody would suggest something like Omega-1 or New Life Spectrum or Dainichi, and there'd be somebody not representing Northfin, of course, because they have good salesmen for Northfin. A lot of people that sell it do a good job. There would be people that, I guess you could call them fanboys or whatnot, and they would just light the people up and say that's garbage. You can only feed Northfin, blah 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 blah. So it kind of turned me off to the food, and I've actually told that to one of the sellers, and it's not his fault. It just annoys me when people get that way. It's like if you don't do a certain thing, people are gonna. That's just how social media is. So these are 3 of the main foods I feed upstairs. with that. I also feed, which I'm out of, is the Omega-1, which is 38% protein, 11% crude fat, 2% crude fat, so on and so on. Whole salmon, halibut, whole shrimp, and then it gets to its binders, wheat flour, wheat gluten. Fresh kelp, krill, astaxanthin, some of the words I can't pronounce. But this is a really good food for the money, I think. Some of my fish, I'll be honest, some of my fish, I don't know if they don't like the salmon. I'm not sure. But not all of my fish will take this. So I mix this in with another food, and I feed it in my fish room because of the price and the quality of it. So I mix this in with some Dainichi and some of the Your Fish stuff, and I feed this in my fish room. I like that because of the price, because I have 8 tanks in my fish room, a tank upstairs, so I have 9 tanks, 520 gallons worth of, which isn't anything compared to some other people, but it's a hobby, it's not a business. I don't make any money off the fish I sell. They go for basically nothing. Another thing I do is I make my own fry food. This container, I don't know if you can see it, but it actually has my fish on it. This is from KG Tropicals. I do not use their food. I got 2 free containers from John because he used the photo of my fish, my blackfin Lathrinops, which I still have. I used both of those containers from him to put my fish food in. Nothing against John's food. I tried it. I used some. I gave the rest of it away. It just wasn't for me, you know. But I use the containers because it has my fish on it, and I think that's kind of cool. But this is my food I feed my fish upstairs. It's all mixed together. It's 2 different Dainichis and the Your Fish stuff, bigger pellets. And then my fry mix is some of the Dainichi, some of the Omega-1, freeze-dried mysis shrimp from Omega-1, and I think that's it. I grind that up in a coffee grinder. It makes a little powder. It works really good. Oh, I'm sorry. I also add golden pearls, which is, this is marine proteins. This stuff is real small. It stays suspended. I don't grind this up. I dump it in after and shake it in together, because if you grind it up, it'll just pop the little spheres that it is. Spheres that it is. That made sense. I sound like Bigfoot from the Stern Show. So yeah, I use golden pearls, 300 to 500 micron and 200 to 300 micron. I feed that to the fry. Seems to work pretty good. All my fish that I keep are haps and peacocks and Lathrinops. I put Lathrinops separate from haps. I don't know why, but because they're a very, very docile hap, I don't keep any type of predator hap. I know a lot of people like predator haps. It's just not for me. I don't have the tank to do it upstairs. I'm limited in space. So I keep, my biggest fish, of course, are my Placidochromis, Fenichalis, the Star Sapphire, the Tanzanias, and then the Giselle. I have a group of them together. Some Electra. Those are all my biggest haps. I have some Melodo and stuff like that. But yeah, so this is a fry mix I make. I make it with a coffee grinder using the larger food ground down and mysis shrimp. Of course, this has 60% protein, so it's more protein and fat for the fry. I also feed New Life Spectrum Grow because of the size of it. It's kind of a little smaller than like a 1 millimeter. It has a lot of smell when the fish go right to it. It has a lot of good whole fish, whole Antarctic krill, Olva seaweed, whole wheat flour. This has good ingredients, 48% protein, it's a little higher, 9% fat. So this is good for fry. They seem to take it pretty well. And then the last thing I feed that a lot of people will probably say, why the hell do you do that? Is Tetramin. Tropical crisp, though. I don't feed the flake, I feed the crisp because I can crumble it up real well and it stays together and the fry will eat it. I'll toss in a pinch of it in each one of the tanks when I'm feeding pellets. I find that some fish don't like taking pellets, so they'll take them and then they'll spit them out because either they're too hard and they haven't softened up enough in the water, but they'll take this stuff really quick. It's nothing fancy. It's fish meal, you know, and then the next thing's dried yeast, and then cornstarch, which is not going to do anything for your fish. It's just stuff they're going to pass, and they're not going to absorb it. But it's just a filler I throw in there as a pinch. I throw it in every day with the pellets in the fish room. I don't feed this in my big tank. It's cheap. A container like this is $8, $9 at Walmart, and I just grab it and I feed it in the fish room because I want a flake in there, and I don't want to buy a cobalt flake or something like that where I have to spend a little more money. So this is basically everything I feed. There's a lot of other good foods out there. I was feeding a product called ZHF, Zoe's Healthy Fish, and she went out of business. So I don't use her product anymore. Like I said, I've used Northfin. I liked it. I think it's really good food. I just when I'm feeding that many fish, it gets expensive. So I kind of shied away from it when I can use the other stuff and I don't have to deal with all the drama of everyone arguing about what's right and what's wrong and what you can and cannot feed your fish. Because I've seen people that run fish rooms off this stuff, feeding wild-caught live bears and stuff like that off Tetramin, which is, I agree, it's with a lot of people, it's a very, very cheap food. But sometimes it's not what you're feeding your fish. You have to stay within their requirements. If they're an herbivore, you have to stick more with plant proteins. And if they're an omnivore, you got to mix it in. And if they're carnivore, you've got to feed a lot heavier on the protein. I also feed in my big tank frozen mysis shrimp and krill. I do that about once a week as a treat, and not as often downstairs with the smaller fish, but upstairs that's what I do. But this is what I feed. I don't endorse any product. I don't have a problem with any other type of fish food. There's a lot of fish foods out there. Use what works best for you. But this is what I'm using in my fish room and in my tank upstairs, and it seems to be working pretty well, and it's affordable, and I think I get good results with my fish. They eat like pigs. So I just wanted to share that, and if anyone has any questions or comments, put them down below. Okay, thanks.